The crash came out of nowhere. A blinding streak of light, the screech of tires, the sound of metal folding against asphalt like bones snapping under pressure. Finn Finnegan had always been the one who brought balance to chaos, the calm center of the storm that surrounded the Forestas, but on that rain-slick highway outside Los Angeles, even balance wasn't enough. When the car spun out of control and collided head-on with an oncoming truck, it was as though the universe had ripped a vital thread from the tapestry of their lives. The paramedics tried, their voices fading into the static of sirens, but Finn was gone before dawn. The hospital that had once echoed with his laughter and brilliance now stood in reverent silence, corridors lined with disbelief. Steffi's world fractured in an instant. The man who had once promised her forever was suddenly a name in a police report, a face in a photograph, a memory soaked in blood and rain. She sat for hours in their living room overlooking the cliffs, staring at the waves that crashed endlessly below, trying to find rhythm in their violence. When Ridge arrived, his face pale and trembling, she didn't cry.
She didn't speak.
Her grief had turned into something colder, a stillness that frightened even her father. Only when she held Hayes in her arms did the dam finally break. The sobs came like convulsions, raw and uncontrollable, as if every suppressed fear and regret poured out all at once. The news spread quickly. Forrester Creations halted all operations for the week. Eric, too weak to speak, watched from his chair as the family gathered in mourning. Hope brought flowers. Brooke whispered prayers. Even Sheila, the woman who had once nearly destroyed their lives, appeared briefly at the memorial service, standing at a distance, her tears real but unwelcome. Everyone wanted to comfort Steffi, but grief had a way of isolating her. She went through the motions, planning the funeral, thanking people for their condolences, but her eyes were distant, as if she were already half elsewhere, searching for Finn among the shadows. Then, a week after the funeral, the first message arrived. Katie Logan was the one who received it, an anonymous text from an untraceable number. He didn't die by accident. It was retribution. You all left her to die. At first, Katie thought it was a cruel prank, another tabloid provocation exploiting tragedy. But when Elektra received a similar message the next morning, the tone darker, more specific, the one you mourn is paying for the one you forgot. You let Luna drown in silence. The dread settled deep. Luna Nozawa's name hadn't been spoken publicly in months, not since her death had been ruled an overdose followed by a fatal fall. Yet here it was, resurfacing like a ghost clawing its way out of the grave. Katie brought the messages straight to Ridge and Bill, hoping for rational explanations. Bill, pragmatic but shaken, immediately suspected a blackmail attempt. But as the days passed, the messages became more invasive, targeting Steffi directly. You took her happiness. Now we'll take yours. The first time Steffi saw one appear on her phone, her breath hitched. She showed it to Ridge, who tried to reassure her that it was some unhinged fan, someone exploiting pain for attention. But when another arrived, accompanied by an image of Finn's wrecked car from an angle never released to the public, even Ridge's composure cracked. Someone knew too much. Someone wanted her afraid. As the threats continued, the Forrester and Spencer families united in an uneasy alliance. Liam moved into Steffi's guest house temporarily, offering protection and emotional support for the children. Bill tightened security around the Forrester estates, installing surveillance systems and hiring private investigators. Even Brooke and Taylor, whose long history of rivalry had defined decades of family tension, stood side by side during the family meetings. Everyone had the same goal: protect Steffi, uncover whoever was behind this, and ensure the past didn't destroy what remained of their family. The investigation began with the obvious. The police re-examined Finn's crash report, but everything pointed to a tragic accident: slick roads, mechanical failure, no signs of sabotage. Yet Bill's private team found anomalies: a cut in the brake line that could have been dismissed as post-collision damage, security footage showing a shadowed figure near Finn's car hours before the crash. Still, no clear motive emerged. That's when Liam, recalling the content of the messages, suggested the unthinkable. What if this wasn't about Finn at all, but about Luna? The mere mention of her name made everyone uneasy. Luna's death had been one of the most polarizing events in their circle. Beautiful, fragile, unpredictable, she had been both muse and menace. Her romance with Finn's cousin, her erratic behavior after her mother's betrayal, the rumors of substance abuse, all had ended abruptly when her body was found on the rocks near Point Dume. The coroner's report cited a fall, but whispers had never stopped. Some said she jumped. Others believed she was pushed. Few dared to imagine she might have survived. Katie and Electra decided to investigate quietly, driven not only by fear but also by curiosity. They began revisiting Luna's final months, tracking down her old contacts, her social media traces, her last known messages. What they found was unsettling: deleted text threads, encrypted emails, and unexplained withdrawals from Luna's bank account days after her supposed death. One message in particular stood out: a draft in Luna's phone recovered from evidence storage, never sent but saved minutes before her disappearance. It read, "If something happens to me, they'll all pretend it's an accident. But I'm not the one they should be afraid of."
She is.
The question was, who is she? As Electra poured through records late one night, she found a trail that led back to an obscure rehabilitation clinic in Arizona, one that catered to high-profile patients seeking privacy. Someone matching Luna's description had been admitted under an alias shortly after the date of her death. There was no record of discharge. When Katie confronted the clinic, they denied everything. But the possibility was enough to shake her. If Luna was alive, that meant everything since Finn's death might have been orchestrated as revenge, or worse, as part of a twisted game. Meanwhile, Steffi's psychological state began to crumble under the pressure. Sleep eluded her. She started hearing things: footsteps outside her window, whispers on the phone line, the faint sound of a woman humming the same tune Luna once sang at a Forrester party. One evening, she found a single white rose on her doorstep, its petals streaked with blood-red dye, and a note: "He died for you, just like I did." That was the night Ridge insisted she leave the house and move into the family compound. The fear rippled outward. Eric, fragile and ill, tried to maintain his dignity, but privately confessed to Brooke that he felt something dark was encircling them again, something that felt like fate repeating itself. Bill, driven by guilt over how many lives his company's power had shattered, personally joined the investigation, tracing financial transactions linked to anonymous shell accounts funding the threatening messages. His findings were chilling: money transfers tied to Luna's mother's old business associates, and one transfer that had originated from Europe mere days before Finn's accident. The pieces began forming a picture none of them wanted to see. It was possible Luna hadn't died, that she had been rescued, or hidden, by someone determined to make the Forresters and Spencers pay for her suffering. Or perhaps it wasn't Luna at all, but someone pretending to be her, weaponizing her memory to destroy them. The uncertainty itself became its own torment. Every phone call, every knock on the door, sent a shiver through the house. Katie and Electra became inseparable partners in the hunt for truth. Together they revisited every name in Luna's orbit: therapists, colleagues, estranged family. Their search led them to a woman named Mara, a nurse who had once worked at the Arizona clinic. After much hesitation, Mara revealed that a young woman resembling Luna had indeed been there, comatose, heavily medicated, kept under tight surveillance. The records were wiped clean shortly after a transfer ordered by a mysterious benefactor. "If she's alive," Mara whispered, "she's not the same person anymore." Back in Los Angeles, Steffi received the message that broke her completely: a video file. It showed Finn's car moments before the crash, recorded from the roadside, filmed by someone who was there. A woman's voice could be heard in the background, whispering, "Justice for Luna." The footage confirmed what everyone feared. The crash wasn't random. Someone had been watching. Someone had planned. The family convened at the Forrester mansion that night, tension palpable, alliances fragile. Brooke clutched Ridge's hand as he read the transcript of the threats aloud. Bill paced, restless, already planning his next move. "This isn't just revenge," he said. "It's psychological warfare." Liam, quieter but angrier, vowed to protect Steffi no matter the cost. For the first time in years, the Forresters and Spencers stood united, not for business or vanity, but for survival. As they worked together, new details emerged. Finn's last call before the crash had been to a number traced to an abandoned property in Santa Monica, registered under a name that once belonged to Luna's grandmother. When authorities searched the site, they found signs of habitation, women's clothing, prescription bottles, and a wall covered in newspaper clippings about Luna, Steffi, and Finn. In the center of the wall hung a photo of Luna smiling, with a handwritten caption beneath it, "She never died. She was reborn." The revelation sent the city's media into frenzy. Forrester Creations faced renewed scrutiny. Reporters camped outside Steffi's home, speculating about conspiracy theories and family curses. But Steffi no longer cared about reputation. Her grief had evolved into obsession. She wanted answers, even if it meant confronting the ghost herself. The climax came weeks later, when Katie and Electra, following a digital trail, tracked a suspicious IP address to a private estate in the desert. There, in a secluded wing, they found her, or someone who looked like her. Luna, or her mirror, sat in a wheelchair, her hair longer, her face thinner, but her eyes unmistakable. She smiled faintly when she saw them, as though she had been expecting this visit. "You came too late," she whispered. "He was never supposed to die. Only she was." Before they could question her further, security forces swarmed the property. Whoever had kept Luna hidden had vanished, leaving behind forged records and unanswered questions. The woman claiming to be Luna was taken into custody, but her mental state was fragile. When asked about the crash, she repeated the same sentence over and over. "He took her place." The balance is restored. The fallout was devastating. Steffi withdrew from public life entirely, her guilt renewed and amplified. Ridge and Brooke fought to keep the family stable while Bill and Liam continued searching for whoever had orchestrated the scheme. Katie and Electra, haunted by what they'd seen, published nothing. They couldn't tell whether the truth would heal or destroy. And yet, deep inside the Forrester mansion, the sense of peace that once defined their family was gone. Late at night, Steffi sometimes thought she saw Finn's reflection in the glass, heard his voice in the wind, or glimpsed a shadow moving across the cliffs where his ashes had been scattered. The text stopped, but the silence that followed felt heavier, more deliberate, as if the story wasn't over, only paused. Because in Los Angeles, the dead have a way of returning, and ghosts never leave quietly. And as the winter light crept over the ocean, Steffi stood by the window once more, clutching Finn's wedding ring in her palm. Somewhere, far away, a phone buzzed in the dark with a single message on its screen. "You think he died for nothing? Look again." The night Finn Finnegan died, the world of Los Angeles seemed to stop breathing. The ocean crashed against the rocks below the cliffside estate as though mourning with the living, and the lights of the city flickered like a dying heartbeat. Forrester Creations went silent, as did the family that bore its name. Every whispered conversation, every sympathetic embrace, felt hollow under the weight of his loss. Steffi's grief was a quiet hurricane, moving through rooms and memories like smoke, uncontrollable, shapeless, and suffocating. Yet amid the sorrow, another kind of tension began to build, one not born from grief, but from fear. Because death, in their world, was rarely final, and secrets had a way of returning long after the flowers had wilted. When Thomas Forrester reappeared, it was as if the past itself had opened its eyes. He walked into the Forrester offices on a gray morning, his presence stirring something between dread and disbelief. Ridge stood frozen, staring at the son who had vanished without explanation months before, after yet another scandal that had fractured the family. No one had heard from him since, not even Hope, not even Douglas. And now, suddenly, there he was, calm, self-contained, and carrying an expression that hinted at both knowledge and guilt. "Thomas?" Steffi's voice broke through the air, soft yet incredulous. Her grief had not dulled her instincts, and she could see it immediately, the shadow behind her brother's eyes. He wasn't just returning home, he was returning with purpose. In the days following his reappearance, Thomas kept mostly to himself. He attended Finn's memorial, standing at a distance as mourners gathered under the marble archway of the Forrester garden. When he approached Steffi afterward, his condolences were sincere, but his words trembled with something unsaid. She wanted to believe he was just overwhelmed, but when she caught him later that evening, staring at the framed photo of Finn on the mantel with a look that was almost analytical, something cold curled inside her chest. It was Ridge who confronted him first. "Where have you been, son?" The question hung between them, heavy with years of unspoken disappointment. Thomas's answer was measured, almost rehearsed. He claimed he had gone to Europe to work with a designer collective, a period of self-reflection and reinvention. But Ridge knew his son too well. The evasiveness, the guarded pauses, it was all too familiar. What he didn't know was that Thomas's return had been triggered not by homesickness, but by a phone call he could no longer ignore. The name attached to that call was Luna Nozawa. Before her supposed death, before the headlines and the mystery and the whispers of revenge, Luna had reached out to Thomas. The two had met months earlier through the industry's chaotic network of collaborations and art events, a fleeting connection that had grown into something darker. She had confided in him, drawn to his intellect, his ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. Thomas, intrigued and perhaps flattered by her admiration, had listened. What began as creative mentorship became confession. Luna spoke of betrayal, of Finn's hypocrisy, of her humiliation at the hands of those who had dismissed her pain. She wanted justice, or retribution, though she didn't use the word aloud. Thomas hadn't taken her seriously at first. People in their world often spoke in metaphors of vengeance and art. But Luna was different. She had a precision to her rage, an architect's mind behind an artist's face. She showed him sketches, blueprints of possibilities, as she called them. A gallery show themed on destruction, she said. A series of accidents meant to provoke reflection on morality. Thomas had found it fascinating, even brilliant, until the moment she mentioned Finn's name. That was when fascination turned to fear. After Luna's death, Thomas had told himself it was coincidence. He hadn't been involved. He hadn't encouraged her. But now, with Finn's fatal crash and Luna's ghost re-emerging through cryptic messages sent to Katie, Electra, and Steffi, the old conversations began replaying in his mind like a curse. The timing, the phrasing, the final voicemail Luna had left him. He will understand what it feels like to lose everything, all aligned too perfectly. When Thomas finally broke his silence, the truth came in fragments. He called Ridge, Steffi, and Liam to meet at the Forrester estate, the same place Finn's memorial flowers still sat half-wilted in the garden. "Before you say anything," Thomas began, his tone restrained but trembling, "you need to know I didn't kill Finn. But I knew this was coming." The words hit Steffi like a physical blow. Ridge rose from his chair, his voice a mix of disbelief and fury. "What are you saying?" Thomas exhaled, eyes downcast. "Luna told me she wanted him to pay. She didn't tell me how, only that it would happen soon. I thought she was talking about some kind of emotional game, not this." He paused, then added, almost in a whisper, "But I think someone else took her plan and made it real." Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. The family exchanged glances filled with accusation and confusion. Liam, always the skeptic, demanded details. Thomas revealed the messages Luna had sent him before her disappearance, the ones he had deleted but later recovered through his cloud storage. They contained fragments of a plot, references to the road, the storm, and the debt he doesn't know he owes. It was enough to reawaken every suspicion they had buried. Steffi's grief shifted into rage. "You knew she was planning something and you said nothing? You let him die." Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Thomas tried to explain that he had dismissed Luna's threats as symbolic art talk, that he hadn't realized how serious she was. But guilt was already consuming him. The truth was, he had sensed danger, and he had chosen to stay silent, not out of malice, but because he was afraid. Afraid of being blamed, afraid of reopening his own history of manipulation and obsession. In the end, his fear had cost his brother-in-law his life. Over the next few days, the family's dynamic splintered. Ridge oscillated between fury and heartbreak, unable to decide whether his son was complicit or simply cursed. Brooke, torn between her loyalty to Ridge and her empathy for Steffi, became the fragile mediator. Meanwhile, Bill Spencer's investigators intensified their probe into the crash, following Thomas's information. What they found only deepened the mystery: traces of tampering on Finn's car, fingerprints that matched none of the family, and a payment made from an anonymous offshore account to a private mechanic days before the accident. Still, one detail stood out most: a call made from Thomas's number to that same mechanic. When confronted, Thomas swore he had no recollection of making the call. He accused someone of hacking his phone, of framing him. But the evidence was merciless. His guilt, even if unintentional, had turned into a weapon against him. The press caught wind of the allegations, and soon headlines screamed, "Thomas Forrester linked to Finnegan crash, family cover-up exposed." Forrester Creations began bleeding contracts. Investors backed away. The empire, once unshakable, now trembled under scandal. But within that chaos, something stranger emerged. Katie and Electra, still receiving anonymous messages tied to Luna's name, discovered that the style of writing, its syntax, its phrasing, mirrored the texts Luna once sent Thomas. When compared, they found subtle differences, as if someone were imitating Luna's voice but not perfectly. That led to a terrifying possibility. Maybe Luna wasn't the author of those messages at all. Maybe someone had used her memory and her connection to Thomas to orchestrate revenge that reached far beyond Finn's death. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A tech forensics specialist hired by Bill traced the origin of one of the threatening messages to a dormant Forrester Creations email server once assigned to Thomas himself. The digital fingerprints led back to a program, one that automatically scheduled messages from pre-written drafts. The timestamps were chilling. The drafts had been created weeks before Luna's death. Steffi confronted Thomas again, her voice raw with exhaustion. "Did you plan this? Did you use her?" He broke down then, not with denial but with horror. "I didn't touch that system. But Luna did. She had access to my office when we were working on designs. I thought she was saving our sketches. She must have been building this." The realization made him sick. Luna hadn't just wanted revenge. She had wanted to immortalize it, to automate it, to keep it alive even after she was gone. Yet that explanation didn't absolve Thomas. He had known too much and done too little. In his arrogance, he had underestimated her capacity for destruction, just as he had once overestimated his own control over people. And now, the consequences were irreversible. As investigations deepened, new evidence surfaced: grainy security footage from a coastal rest stop hours before Finn's accident. It showed a woman with Luna's silhouette meeting a man wearing a hooded jacket. The timestamp placed the encounter one day after Luna's supposed death. When authorities enhanced the footage, they found that the man bore an uncanny resemblance to Thomas. He swore it wasn't him. He had been out of the country, his passport confirming his alibi. But when the footage was shown to Ridge, even he couldn't hide the resemblance. "If it's not you," Ridge said, voice trembling, "then someone wants us to believe it is." The question of motive grew darker. Who would go to such lengths to resurrect Luna's ghost, to kill Finn, to turn the Forresters against each other? Theories abounded: competitors, spurned lovers, even corporate saboteurs. But one name kept returning to the surface: Luna's mother, Poppy. She had disappeared after Luna's death, leaving no forwarding address, no contact. And according to the mechanic who had tampered with Finn's car, the person who paid him spoke with a soft, deliberate voice, female, accented, and eerily calm. By now, Steffi's grief had transformed into something else entirely. She was no longer just mourning Finn. She was hunting for answers, for redemption, for closure. Thomas, desperate to prove his innocence, joined her. Together, they followed the faint trail of Poppy's last known whereabouts to a coastal town in Northern California. What they found there was both miraculous and horrifying. Luna was alive. She was pale, thinner, her once vibrant energy replaced by a detached calm. She claimed no memory of the crash, no awareness of the messages or the scheme. "I was supposed to die," she told them. "But someone saved me. Someone who said I could start over." When Steffi pressed her, Luna's gaze shifted toward Thomas. "He told me Finn would understand," she murmured, "that pain is art, and art must destroy before it creates." Thomas fell silent. He remembered saying something like that months ago, back when Luna had first spoken of revenge. He hadn't meant it literally. It was the kind of abstract nonsense artists often exchange late at night. But now, hearing it echoed in her broken voice, he realized how his words had been weaponized. The truth, as it unraveled, was brutal. Luna hadn't died in her supposed accident. She had faked it, aided by someone she trusted, someone who had manipulated both her and Thomas to settle old scores within the Forrester empire. The final mastermind was revealed to be an associate of Poppy's, a former investor whose fortune had been ruined by a Forrester business decision years earlier. He had found Luna, fragile and furious, and molded her anger into his revenge. But Finn's death hadn't been part of the plan. It had been a miscalculation, a collision caused by Luna's panic when she tried to abort the scheme. Thomas's indirect involvement, his silence, had set everything in motion. In the aftermath, the family fractured again. Rich defended his son publicly, but privately mourned the man Finn had been. Steffi, broken beyond repair, withdrew from everyone. Luna disappeared once more, leaving behind a final message written in Thomas's handwriting. "I only wanted him to feel what I felt." Thomas's return had begun as an act of atonement, but it ended as a confession. He stood one evening on the cliffs where Finn's ashes had been scattered, the wind howling through his coat. "I didn't kill him," he whispered, though there was no one left to hear. "But I might as well have." In Los Angeles, the waves kept breaking, relentless as guilt. The world would move on. Forrester Creations would recover. Families would rebuild. But the shadow of that night would never fade. Because in the end, Thomas Forrester hadn't just come home. He had come to face the truth that in his silence, in his arrogance, he had become both witness and accomplice to the tragedy that destroyed them all.